Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. And of course, our conversation for today is on the need to improve Nigeria's tax system, particularly this time we're having dwindling oil price. And I have here with me in the studio the President, Chartered Institute of Taxation, Mr. Mark Dike. Thank you very much, Mr. Dike, for joining me on the program.
Thank you very much, Imeze. Nice to be here.
Good. Thank you. Now, we can see the country faced with a scenario of sharp drop in oil revenue. Now, to what extent can we fill this gap with tax revenue?
Thank you very much indeed. Oil, Nigeria survived. Nigeria was able to do all that is required, especially in terms of providing the wherewithal for the make life worth living for the citizens. Even though Nigeria first had commercial export of crude oil in 1958, of course, the first, Nigeria first started crude oil production in 1956 in President Biafra State. We did not start talking about oil critically as a source of revenue until after the Civil War. And if you remember, in the 60s particularly, before the military intervention in 1966, the regions were self-reliant. And what did they rely on? Taxes and our natural, not crude oil,
natural
but agricultural produce.
Products.
Palm oil, palm kernel for the eastern region, cocoa for the western region, and groundnuts for the north. I remember those days too. The regions were almost semi-autonomous in terms of revenue, because they controlled education, they controlled health. The federal government was more in control of foreign affairs and defense, and only intervened in to set example and models for education. That's why it now had, they had universities at the federal government colleges, but they did not go and take over and start populating the regions with federal government colleges. That was the situation. But oil came, particularly after the Civil War, and incidentally 1973, after the Arab-Israeli Yom Kippur War, where the Arabs, who were the predominant members of OPEC, now saw oil as a veritable instrument for warfare. You use what you have to get what you need.
What you want. And
the oil price moved from $2 per barrel to 10, and thereafter it has been an upward swing. And so, if we relied on taxation before oil, and we're able to still meet our developmental needs, there's absolutely no reason why we cannot still go back.
Now, so why is our tax revenue performance so far? Now, looking at the data, tax revenue to GDP ratio, it's about 12%, and it's of course one of the lowest in African continent.
It's because of low tax compliance, low tax payment culture in Nigeria, because oil is there, and people feel that why bother them? The oil money is there.
Is it about low tax compliance, people not wanting to pay tax, or perhaps the regulators or the government that is supposed to collect those taxes, perhaps because of oil, don't see the need to actually go for those taxes?
The problems are multifarious. First, the oil money is there, and then bringing so much revenue. Second is that the people now feel, yes, there's so much oil. After all, former head of state said, even though in a different context, as he's tried to explain, that Nigeria's problem in the upsurge of oil price in the 70s, Nigeria's problem was not about how to spend it. And if you see the kind of profligacy we had with that upsurge in oil revenue, everything was happening, and then everybody now say, okay, fine, you can, I'll go there. You know, we're not getting value for money. That's one issue. An issue of corruption, that not all the money that is spent is actually faithfully spent for provision of public goods and services. In essence, then, we spend more than the quality of infrastructure that is put in place. Secondly, a lot of people are also pulverized. Because pulverized in the sense then that either the unemployment is very high, and it is people who are gainfully employed that that can pay tax. You don't pay tax from nothing. It's an issue then of the quid pro quo. You give, you expect to receive something in return. You pay tax for a purpose. For government to provide infrastructure, good health care, affordable housing, good schools, and in fact even like education. In advanced countries, developed countries, free Medicare for people. But is it happening in Nigeria? So there's a disincentive in terms of people not getting the value
for their money.
And there's also the issue about corruption, in the sense then that so much money is spent, but we are not getting commensurate services. Now, when I was just reading, it was last Saturday, a Reverend Father was talking about P2B, former governor of Anambra State. Well, erosion pervaded a particular school, and I asked the government officials, how much will it cost? And they came up with 15 million. But I asked the Reverend Sister, principal of the school, how much will it cost? The sister called the consultants, and the consultants came up with 20 million. P2B insisted that money has to be given to the principal to go and execute. Government is saving 30 million. Most officials wanted to suppress it, but Obi insisted, and that work was done, and it was very well done. Since he returned schools to the missionary, he decided to disburse money directly to the mission, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the proprietors of the schools. And if you see the quality or rehabilitation that have been done in those schools.
Right. Recently, the federal government mandated agencies, FIRS and some other, revenue generating agency, to giving them target of revenue they will have to come up yearly. Now, the business community fear that that might make this tax authority to become aggressive and impose, unnecessary burden on them. Do you see that happening?
Certainly not. I think he who fears that happening is somebody who is either not keeping his books properly. Because if you keep your books properly, no man is under any obligation, legal or otherwise, to open his storehouse. That's one maxim in taxation. To open his storehouse for the taxman to scoop all his wealth out. A man has to provide to protect his treasures. If you're on the right side of the law, you kept your books properly, and computed your taking advantage of all the provisions of the law. There's absolutely no reason to fear if the taxman comes knocking on your door.
All right. Now, but
if on games, cooking your books, and the like, then then you can fear that the taxman is coming.
But there's issue of multiple taxation, which of course has been the major concern for most businesses, and yet government doesn't seem to have really dealt with that.
This is correct, but then conscious effort is being made to do that. In fact, the 2002-2003 Professor Dr. Phillips Study Group report came very strongly on that particular issue. that multiple taxation is a nuisance. It does not encourage voluntary tax compliance. It's better that you minimize the number of taxes for efficiency purposes and then elicit voluntary compliance. It was a strong recommendation. It accepted it. If you look at the national tax policy document that have been, launched by the president 2 years ago, April, 5th, 2012, that was, very clearly stated. And recently, again, with the hue and cry, the National Economic Council, which is a federal statutory body, chaired by the Vice President, with all the state governors as members, Minister of Finance, National Planning, and the rest of them also as members. They set up a technical committee, and that committee has finished its work. Issues about, harmonizing the taxes that can be collected. And I believe the President has, ratified those recommendations. And all states, first of all, Inspector Police have been, directed to dismantle any roadblock that, put here and there to collect illegal levies and taxes, or the name of taxes. 2, states are asked to rationalize that what they call approvals, taxes and levies, approvals for collection. A decree that was passed by the military in 1998, which has still remained, but now found out that that law does not reflect or accord with the realities currently on ground. It was one of those issues also reviewed. And how many taxes are collectible in a particular state? They looked at those lists and tried to streamline and harmonize them. And these are part of the things, the outcome that we've soon, brought to the public domain.
Okay, so but
Lagos State, for instance, yeah. They already, most of them states already do so. Give an example like Lagos State. What Lagos did, they did what they call an MOU, the state government and the local government. Why should we dissipate our energies dipping from the same terrain? For instance, in one state, not Lagos, the state government talking about sense for business premises. The local government is talking about business premises fee. They're the same thing. So it's double taxation. So they now did an MOU that looking at those areas where we can collectively collect from one single source. Because I have greater information, access. I collect for and on behalf of the 2 tiers of government. That's what the MOU Lagos did. So everybody bring in the information, and with that now, you don't have multiple dipping by various tiers of government. That's an example. Level, but that is not yet actualized. Remember about 3 or so years ago, there was a strike by cattle, cow, traders. And for some weeks, there were, we had scarcity of meat. They were provided from the Joint Tax Board, what they call jointly collected taxes, whereby instead of you start from Maiduguri, so my Borno State, to Yobe, to Gombe and all that, each state is collecting some levy until maybe the border reaches Lagos. There are as many as 20 collection, gates. They now said, we talk about originating state, destination state, the pass-through state. Let us collect only at the destination, the final point for disposal, and then that money will be shared on an agreed ratio. That's the kind of beauty of VAT. Some people are campaigning against VAT because they say VAT is supposed to be a state tax. But the issue now is that if it's to talk about within the state, no problem. But because of mobility of goods and services in Nigeria, most goods that come into Lagos are not consumed in Lagos. And because they have to, and you need to recoup, if you are not the final consumer, you need to recoup the cost you paid at the initial purchase of the good.
All right,
those are challenges.
Before we get to the issue of VAT, I wonder how much control, do governments actually have on local government in this matter? I mean, talking about simple taxation, really, how much control does the state governments have?
Well, local governments are all components of states, And even though under the law, look at personal income tax, that's what they call State Joint Revenue Committee, which is supposed to be the state government and the local government ought to sit together to harmonize issues among. But you know, the truth of the matter is that at the federation level, where revenue is shared, federal, states, and local governments, there is a ratio. The ones for the local government not attend the Federal Accounts Allocation Committee. It is only the federal level of State for Finance as chairman, the commissioners of finance of the local governments don't come there. So the states now collect their own share and that of local governments within them. And we had a lot of stories of misapplication. These revenues that come for the federal. Now, the local government chairmen are appointees. Most states don't even have elected chairman councils. Some of them are caretaker committees. So there's a lot of challenges there in terms of their even getting that one that comes from the states. And then activity is only coming on at the month end when there's revenue to be shared. After that, everywhere goes fallow and quiet in local governments. So local governments are still not what they should be under the scheme of things. A lot of state governments oppose having local governments as autonomous arms of government. I'm one of those that said, if states are complaining against the federal, why I don't want autonomy for local governments? That they should be autonomous so that they'll be able to stand up and be counted. If things are wrong,
they can be held responsible.
They can be held responsible because they have independent sources of revenue. So what is happening, a lot of rascality therefore, when they don't get what they want, they now have a lot of illegal extortion.
All right, just hold your thoughts there, Mr. Dike. Let's take a quick break. Or we'll go on a short break, and when we return, we'll continue with that conversation, improving Nigeria's tax system. Do stay with us.